Hey everyone, welcome back to the Not Just a Pony Ride podcast. I'm your host, Katie Ott, occupational therapist and CTRI here at Hetra in Gretna, Nebraska. And today I have one of my favorite friends with me, Mr. John Killian. Jonathan, you have been a gracious supporter of the podcast and of the EAS industry as a whole. So thank you for what you're doing. We appreciate you. And we've sent lots of people your way on a topic that I think is very daunting for some folks, maybe a little confusing, but it's something we have to have, and that is insurance. We
Yes.
did an episode, I don't know, earlier this year, I think, on kind of the ins and outs and like basics of what you should be looking for when it comes to insurance and how to kind of navigate that scenario. So today we're going to get a little bit more in the weeds and talk about a few different things as it relates to insurance, especially EAS centers. So welcome. Do you want to introduce yourself to the folks that maybe didn't hear your episode and are meeting you for the first time?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Katie. Great to be here again. Uh, and again, just thank you for what you guys are doing for all your riders, for all your participants, their families, and just the impact to your communities that you serve. So it is a pleasure to be here. Love the podcast. Yes, I think it was episode 93 for those tracking everything. But
I'll put the link to it in the show notes if you want to go back and listen to it, folks.
perfect. Yeah. So there are there are a few topics since we spoke last that kind of have cropped up and seem to be kind of a recurring theme, if you will.
Can I time you out for 1 second?
Yeah.
John, why do you know anything about insurance and horses? I want people to know what you do for a living and why you are so knowledgeable and obviously the person to talk about this because you work with this stuff every single day.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. This is the area where I'm focused in my agency. Most of the people I interact with and work with are running some sort of equine assisted services, right? EAS. So that regarding insurance, it is hard to find a carrier that could possibly offer quotes for the entire operation.
Mhm.
So I tend to see, they'll have a carrier for liability. If they own the property, maybe they'll have a different carrier for the property. Maybe they have a different carrier for maybe their equipment, tractors or arena equipment, things of that sort. And so what I enjoy is going to different conferences across the country and meeting facilities and operations that work in the EAS field. And that has been a focus of my agency. And I've volunteered at clients' operations as sidewalker, getting the horses tacked up. And so I've enjoyed not only seeing it from the instructor perspective, from the participant perspective, and learning what goes on so that I can understand fully how to cover different scenarios with your ranch, with your operation, no matter if you're in Texas, if you're in Minnesota, go left and right. So across the country.
And I just can't tell you how appreciative I am of that perspective because there are lots of people that can serve this industry, right? Whether it's insurance or footing for your arena or, whatever the service is. But if you don't fully understand what we do in EAS and how it impacts our staff and our volunteers and even our donors and our board, all of that, you kind of understand all of that. Like that's how you serve our industry best because it is so complex. What we do is really, really different than any other industry that's out there, even equine industry. If you're a trainer, the stuff that we're doing in our arenas is much different even on the, equestrian perspective. So I appreciate that internal perspective and you really wanting to know and inquire and educate yourself about what we're doing in our field because that's huge. And then the second thing that I would ask you is, are you a puzzle guy? Do you like puzzles?
I do. I do. It is interesting, even though we have, the EAS field is broad,
Mhm.
and there are a lot of facilities across the country. I'm always excited to be on, location of different operations or just even phone conversations and hear, why do you do what you do? How did you get started? And who do you serve? Who comes to get lessons from you, and so forth?
How long have you been working with EAS centers specifically? It's been a few years, right?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. I think it's about 3 years.
Yeah. So you've seen some stuff and you've gained some experience working in our industry. What are some big, like, what are the first big updates that come to your mind when we're talking EAS center insurance? Anything major?
Yeah, there's actually a couple big ones for 2026 that I see. One of them is there's one or two major carriers out there that appear to look at their book of business, their policies and their coverages and so forth. And I'm starting to see some indications that there's some potential discontinuation of some of the coverages that were previously offered. What I would do is I would look at your renewal quotes, your renewal letters, have those conversations, see what they actually say, and just make sure, are there any changes? What are the changes? Obviously, you want to take a look at how that applies to your situation.
I think it's probably easy because insurance is sort of one of those things where, like you've mentioned before, John, you're kind of in one of two camps, like, wow, this is really confusing and please explain this to me. Or two, yeah, I got insurance, it's fine, right? Like I got a guy, he handles that. So I think it's probably easy to just get, maybe those letters in the mail and just send the check for the next year and be done with it or whatever. But you're saying to really, really look closely as some of those types of policies are being dropped or not continued. And so you could find yourself in a pickle of not being covered in certain areas.
Exactly. And I mean, just speaking from my own personal experience, just the last 8 to 12 months, really, for whatever reason, I'm seeing things missing from coverages, stuff that they thought that they were covered. You want to review your coverages. It's very easy to forget where you left off last year.
Mm-hmm.
Is your agent still around? Let's take a look at the current coverage. Let's take a look at what are the changes. Buildings seem to be disappearing from certain policies that I've reviewed, and it doesn't take me but a few minutes to kind of look it over, have a conversation with you, and that's my first objective: is what do you have covered, and what's listed on your insurance, is that your knowledge, is that your experience, is that your recollection of what you want covered? Have they changed your wind hail deductible? That's a favorite go-to with a couple carriers that I'm very familiar with. Is sometimes they'll just exclude wind and hail damage. It depends on what part of the country you are.
Mm-hmm.
Weight of ice and snow. We're in winter still, right?
Yeah.
Out here in North Texas, Northeast Texas, there was several inches of snow, maybe even a foot of ice on certain buildings, and it just obliterated all the horse arenas in this area. Mass catastrophe event in a localized area. Does your policy even cover the weight of ice, rain, and snow?
Yeah. What a wild thing to think
So,
about in Texas. You'd have never probably thought of that, but you
right,
need it if it happens.
right, and we all know that not all carriers are created equal, right?
Mhm.
Another development is with the advent of AI, can be very wonderful, can help us, do presentations. I use AI in my practice every day. You want to make sure that you edit and review, and again, know what you're getting for that project. But there seems to be additional certification websites that are popping up. It's super easy to create a website these days, right? Thus, enter certification online. The convenience, right? The
Mhm.
convenience is there. The price is low and affordable. Well, that's all on purpose. Great marketing.
Mhm.
So I would take a look at, make sure if you're looking for multiple certifications, multiple accreditations, just make sure that the source, make sure make a phone call. Path International is wonderful. And so you want to make sure that convenience doesn't outweigh the subject matter.
Absolutely. We were just having this conversation the other day as these little trainings and certifications, quote unquote, are popping up everywhere and we don't know anything about them. So strongly advise people to get some references of people that have maybe been through the course you're looking for, the certification you're looking for. And like you said, pick up the phone and call some of your professional associations, that we can trust, and ask the right questions for sure. How does that affect insurance? So have you seen people wanting to do some of these certification courses and then they don't uphold as far as like coverage goes, or do you see anything in the liability end from you, John?
Yeah, I've seen some of these websites, various clients that don't have all the certifications that they want. They're looking online for the different options, and so I've checked out some of these sites. You just want to make sure, how reputable is this entity? Have you heard of it before? Search. I always like to search on the internet. You put in whatever phrase you want and then add the word scam or add the word legitimate, and chances are there's been a number of other people searching for the same question. Yeah, just to see what pops up. And again, you take it all with a grain of salt, and then you make the decision that's best for your situation. And again, to reiterate, if you're not certified, I can still get insurance coverage. It's just a little bit different conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm fortunate to be in a position where I represent a very good niche carrier in this industry, but I also have access to broker with some other leading carriers. So I get to see different dynamics and offerings from different carriers. There are carriers, if we want to highlight some changes or some updates from last time we spoke, there's a carrier, well-known carrier, good carrier, that will actually quote and offer the policy if you're not certified. If you're not through Path or Spirit Horse or some other recognized entity, they will offer it.
That's been kind of understood, I think, in the insurance industry for a long time, was that you had to be certified in some way to obtain that coverage.
With most carriers, yes.
Yeah.
There are some operations out there that I've had conversations with and been able to help regarding the insurance, get them coverage, and bottom line, what fits their needs. How can we protect them now? And some of them are on their way to be certified.
That's what I was going to say. If you're on the journey to certification and you're like, well, how do what comes first, the chicken or the egg, or you put the cart before the horse, or whatever you want to say, how do you start your center and get certified and all of that? So that gives a really, really, nice opportunity to those centers to be safe and insured while on that journey too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, maybe just highlight a couple other changes in the industry. I'm seeing a few carriers drop certain coverages, petting zoo, camps, pony rides, things that, some of the facilities, some of the operations might offer. That's just kind of what I've been seeing trends.
I want to touch really quick on that programming change part of things, because I think that's something to take note of. And I believe we talked about this more at length in that first episode we did together, but in EAS centers, I mean, we're constantly like, especially as nonprofits, we're like, how can we help our community? What are we going to do? You might sit in a 1 hour meeting and come out of it with like 3 new programming ideas, right? And you're like, great, let's recruit participants tomorrow for this mini camp. Then you find out your insurance provider maybe doesn't cover those mini camps, whatever you were going to do. So I think that's really important to note, is that, if that is an update in kind of your industry on your side of things, how that might impact.
I think you've got some facilities that have the advantage or an advantage in their community. Maybe they're the only facility for 50 miles, 100 miles, maybe 200 miles. To their advantage, I would think they do want to do either traditional lessons as well, offer some summer camps. They come up with ways to not only keep their staff busy, but manage their herd correctly, continue and operate and be creative and offer some different activities. Then after that discussion comes the does our insurance cover that?
Mhm.
Or how can we get that covered? Well, let's go call our agent. Unfortunately, many times, if the answer is no, then what do you do? Responsibly operating your facility, there's two choices. You either move forward and work with that exclusion, or you simply add that coverage to your current policy.
Right. What does it take to be covered? Whether that's adding
Right.
something, be a matter of like, what are the modifications that we could make to this program to keep us insured or things like that too, right?
Right. And sometimes that can be kind of a fine line or a gray area, right? And
Mhm.
case in point is what parameters, if they're able to include it on a policy, let's be sure we know what parameters are going into it. And so you can plan accordingly.
Yeah. And I think we talked about, we'll try not to, repeat everything we said in the first episode, but I just think it's so important for people to note is that like you need to have that relationship with your agent, right? Like I can tell you firsthand from, all the interactions we've had, John. I mean, I'd just get you on the horn and say, John, here's what we're doing. And you'd tell me yes or no, or here's what we need to do. Right. And I think having a relationship you feel like is open and they understand what you're doing, that you're not going to call your agent, they're going to be like, what, I don't get it, what are you doing, why are you doing that, and so someone that you feel like really understands you and supports you in your mission, and you wanting to serve your communities, and how do we do that safely, I think is really important too.
Yeah, and that's kind of a overlying point, if you will. It is important to be covered. It is important to review your policy. And how difficult is your policy to manage?
Hmm. Right.
What's the dynamic of that?
Hmm.
I do see, a lot of facilities, again, they will have a different carrier. Let's say they have 5 to 7 different policies spread over 3 or 4 carriers.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, but do we have an opportunity to maybe streamline that a little bit?
Yeah. And with
I can come,
you do broad spectrum, right? So
yeah,
they
yeah,
would people could call you for your tractor or for your mini camp. I mean, you'd kind of do everything, right?
yeah, the being an agent that is deeply involved and stays up on trends, participates in conferences, meeting people face to face and, listening to the challenges out there, providing solutions that will be a win-win for everyone. We want a fair rate, we want good coverage, and then service after
Right.
that. If there's claims, who are you going to call? Do they pick up the phone? Do they return a text? Do they return an email? Obviously, emergencies don't call us ahead of time to schedule. And so, what is that relationship like? And that's what we pride ourselves in my agency is it is quite all right at 5:15 on a Friday afternoon to give us a call if you need something, if you have a question. I don't want you sitting there all weekend stewing. I can't wait to, the office opens up and John can answer the question Monday at 9 a.m. I would rather answer and help you right away.
Yeah. So you've been in the EAS industry now for a while, been at conferences, interacting with folks. What other trends are you seeing or things that have changed that you've noticed since you've been, insuring some centers and really kind of been boots on the ground there?
One trend is leasing horses, where a facility doesn't own the horse, but they lease it. It could be a very simple contract arrangement. But let's just say you own 10 horses and maybe you lease 3. So you have a total of 13. When you're in that situation, you, in essence, are boarding those 3 horses, even if you're not charging a fee for it, right?
Yeah.
So, on an insurance point of view, you're boarding those 3 horses. They're in your care, custody, and control. So let's make sure that we cover them properly. And a lot of times I see that they're not. It is as simple as adding the boarding component and then adding the care, custody, and control component. And that will take care of you. Now, the interesting thing on the care, custody, and control, I have an option where we can include transit. If your owned horses, we cover those off premise. So wherever you take your horses, let's say you get the opportunity to do a Special Olympics show, at another facility or some other event, even a parade. you're going to be covered off in this. Well, if you board these horses and you have care, custody, and control, and you're okay, and the owner's okay, you taking those horses with you, well, we need to make sure you are covered, the liability drill down, and that you are covered if you take those horses off premise as well.
It's fantastic that we're able to find folks who will, lease horses like that, because that's something that's wonderful from an equine perspective. That horse will always have a home, so if that horse doesn't work out for whatever reason, or, whatever, that horse will always have that owner in that home, which is great on the organizational end, but also great financially because we don't have to buy those horses. So that's handy.
Right.
But how do
Right.
we work on the logistics side of that? You don't always think about quote unquote not sexy things, right? Like insuring that horse
Yeah.
that's not technically yours. That's interesting because I think more and more centers are going to some of these care leases and things like that.
Exactly. And it truly is a win-win. But, my job, your agent's job is to understand your operation, sometimes in a very detailed way, in order to cover all the risk that you may or may not be aware of. And so it's my job to make sure we properly cover you, because if an incident happens, you have to have that insurance in place before that happens. We can't rewind and go back.
Leading an equine assisted services program takes more than passion. It takes clarity, strategy, and sustainability. Hetra University's newest 6-week mini course is designed specifically for executive directors, program directors, and leadership teams in equine assisted services. You'll learn how to assess your mission, culture, resources, and community needs, then build practical skills in budgeting, fundraising, marketing, and grant writing that reflect real costs of running an EAS program. The course is taught by Hetra CEO Edie Gotten, who has led the organization for over 30 years and has been instrumental in its growth, bringing real-world insight you won't find in generic leadership courses. At just $59, this is an accessible investment into your program's long-term health. Live participants who register now also have the opportunity to pick Edie's brain with a live Q&A session each week of the 6-week mini course. Register and learn more at the link in our show notes or at hetrauniversity.org. Speaking of wacky scenarios, you've been in the field for a long time. We know that in EAS centers, we come up with some crazy things and stuff just happens. I can think of one scenario which was interesting. So we were both at the Path International Conference in Denver, Colorado. Had a great time. It was wonderful. Met lots of awesome people and did a lot of good networking. But you were there as well, John. And we had a center come up to us at our booth that we have worked with extensively through Hetra University. They're good friends of ours. And they said, "What do you guys do with service animals?" And we kind of went back and forth had a conversation about how we manage service animals at Hetra in relation to our horses and programming and things of that nature, which, by the way, as a side note, we're going to do a podcast episode on soon because that's a whole nuanced thing. Anyway.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So anyways, the question was, how do we desensitize our horses to dogs? Because our current insurance provider we can't have dogs on our property at all based on our,
Mm.
their insurance exclusions or whatever. And obviously service animals would be excluded from that. But how do we desensitize our horses to dogs before the service animals get there? Do you see
Oh,
the
yeah.
conundrum? And
Yeah.
so I said, you know what? Go talk to my friend John because he will be able to tell you what the skinny is on that. Maybe not for your specific provider, but just things like that come up that we don't really think about, but we need to from a liability perspective.
Yes. And this, again, you highlight kind of a big picture of, not all carriers are created equally, right? They're going to exclude certain things that they've decided to exclude. Now, having said that, most facilities don't allow people to bring their pets on site. Side note, I would recommend you put that in the language in your liability release. Just make it obvious because you never know. And if you need to make exceptions for service animals, again, work with your attorney, work with your participants, etc.
Call your agent and figure out what you're going to
Yeah.
do, right? And how to get around
Right.
it. I think when we have a whole policy around service animals at Hetra, and it has a contract associated with it. We worked really closely with some service animal experts and our attorney and things to kind of work through all of this. What other kinds of one-off bizarre things have you had in the insurance industry since working with EAS centers?
Let's see. Well, it's not that bizarre, I would say. But I do get asked this a lot when we have multiple entities on site. The founder lives on site. It's their house. Maybe they have everything in an LLC, and the nonprofit side of things is on the same location. Their personal stuff's in a trust. I do see, sometimes the policies are written in the person's name. And so I would, again, consult your attorney, your advisors. And from an insurance perspective, whoever is listed as named insured, you're going to share those limits. So if your names are on the policy, your trust, your LLC, your 501c3, then those entities are going to share whatever limits you have. Let's say a million/3 million, for example, potentially. So again, consult your attorneys and so forth. And there's two ways to go about that. One, each entity has its own policy. The other option, if you choose to have all entities on a policy, I would strongly recommend, if it fits your situation, to get an umbrella policy. Many times those umbrella policies, the premium is going to be lower than a retainer from your attorney if you get sued. So what that umbrella provides is every entity gets more money to defend themselves. And if you're found negligent, hopefully that umbrella is big enough where it pays for that situation.
Yeah, God forbid we would never want that, but is protection you think about. And that's something that's different about the EAS industry as a whole, that's very different as well, doing all of their work where they live and where they work and where, all of
Right.
those things where it's an EAS, that does happen a lot of times, that those services are taking place on whether it's the owner or whoever on their property. And maybe some of the horses are used for programming and some of them aren't. And how does all of that fit together? And that's why I asked you if you like puzzles, because I feel like, there's so many little moving parts and nuances to what we do, that it's probably, I'm assuming, really easy to get yourself in a bind where something happens and you're like, shoot, I didn't think about that. This happened and I didn't think about it, and putting my goats on the policy, or whatever that case may be, especially in our industry.
Yeah, and there's a lot of facilities. You have neighbors, even if it's very rural. You probably know your neighbors. You may have friends. You may have volunteers that have horses. But what do you do when you have a group of your friends or acquaintances say, "Hey, you have this nice arena
Mm.
and it's covered. Can we bring our horses over here once a month and just ride in your arena?" And most people, kindness of your heart, of course, you're going to say yes. Yeah, come on over. It's a great time to hang out and so forth. Well, unfortunately, that's an insurance conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Does your carrier cover that? Or are they going to exclude that type of situation? It could be a trail ride. It doesn't have to be in the arena.
I was thinking about that. I saw a center that did trail rides as a fundraiser, which to each their own, but opens you up to a whole nother liability, situation.
Right.
Is people you've never met, you don't know, on your horses, on your property. It's kind of the same situation you're talking about. Again, might be a great fundraiser for you, but did you have the conversation with your insurance agent about what happens if Joe falls off and gets hurt, and you just don't want to get yourself into that situation.
Thinking it from all angles in that situation, do those horse owners have off premise coverage for their horses? Maybe, maybe not. That's a question I ask. Fortunately, in my situation, I have a solution for that situation. We add a lesser's risk rating for that, and they can bring their horses. We don't have a number of visit limit or stipulation. It's a flat lesser's risk because, in essence, they're leasing the space from you,
Space. Mm-hmm.
right? So, talking earlier about complicated situations and puzzles, I want to try and find a way to cover what you want to do or what you are doing on your property
Mm-hmm.
and in your operation. My mindset, which I think is important, is I want to partner with you on the insurance side of things to cover those risks, so that God forbid something happens, I'm the one handing you the proverbial check to make you whole, and so that you can continue your operation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the point of insurance, right? So to make you whole after an event, after a situation, so that you can continue going forward. That's a great outlook to have is how do we cover what you want to do? And if you want to be creative, how can we accommodate your growth and your expansion?
I love that. I feel like that's like the best summary of this episode. It's just like, how do we keep you doing what you want to do? And like you said, just keep our communities served with the services that we want to, but staying safe and God forbid if an event were to happen, continuing that, right? So I guess, kind of as we're, maybe wrapping up here a little bit is in your experience in working with some EAS centers and things like that, is there any advice, that you would have to EAS centers, or do you think there's anything that, people are generally doing wrong that, you hope to correct or
Yeah, great question. I would say big picture, review your coverage. I get asked a lot, can you give us a quote compare what we already have?
mm-hmm.
And interestingly, I'll get an email that has 3 to 7 different carriers. What I enjoy doing is simplifying the process. Look at your coverages. Can we simplify it? Can we make it easier to manage? I put together a 1-page Excel spreadsheet if needed, that if there's a lot of policies and so forth. So I'll put that together so that the staff person you hired yesterday that doesn't know anything about insurance can look at that piece of paper and know exactly when the policies are due, what is covered where. Obviously, my phone number is there, so they can just give me a holler, but they can kind of know what to expect and kind of manage it as they need to, financially when renewals come in and so forth.
Yeah.
So that's an item. The other item is I appreciate your worth to the community and the value that you bring, right? Keep doing what you're doing, grow as much as you want to grow. Part of that is interacting with your agent. Make sure, ask the questions. What is excluded? And if they can't answer that, search for perhaps someone that can offer those solutions. And review the policies. You get new equipment, you get new horses, you get more horses, you start doing more lessons. There's potential for, again, adjustments to your policy as you grow.
I mean, is really the bottom line is to keep checking in on it. And as we grow and expand and add things and get creative and come up with all these awesome, wonderful ideas, are we staying safe? I think that's a big part. And I appreciate the fact that you said any regular Joe can open your spreadsheet and understand what's going on, because I am not insurance savvy. I'm not. I would venture to say that most people would probably skew on the side of the scale that is not super insurance savvy. So being able to digest that and have it in a format that's easy to understand for people so that they know when they're protected and when they're not is very important too. So we appreciate that.
We don't need to make you an insurance agent, but we definitely have to look out for you, provide suggestions, and then also be a resource for your board.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really talk about that too much, but something that I see, they have a board, but they don't have any directors and officers insurance for that board. In a nutshell, why is that important? Because if you're on the board and something goes awry because of the decision that the boards make, and every board member's personal assets are exposed.
Interesting.
Yep. And that's the purpose of the DNO, the directors and officers policy,
Uh-huh.
is to cover the board for their activities and provide coverage should they be found negligent in what they're doing. And that way their personal assets aren't at risk. You've got
Yeah.
that insurance to cover it.
Interesting. I'm not a CEO or insurance savvy. We already talked about that. And I'm learning about this for the first time. I didn't even think about that, but you're absolutely right. Well, as always, you are a wealth of information, Jonathan. I appreciate you being
Well, thank
here.
you.
If anybody has a question, they want your help, they want you to take a look at what they've got, that kind of a thing. What kind of services do you offer people, or how do they reach you? Could I reach out to you for a free quote kind of thing?
We want to be a resource. I would love the opportunity to quote.
Okay.
And if we can't help today, maybe we can help in 10 months.
Mm-hmm.
When you renew, or even, if you're starting your program or about to start your program, you want to get kind of some advice and some knowledge about what insurance do we need? What do we need to cover? what does it look like? And can you give us a ballpark range on what to expect the premium would be, right? Because that's all part of your operation and costs and expenses, and maybe startup costs, continuation costs, things of that sort. So that's what I enjoy, being that resource, showing you the numbers, talking about your program, why you do what you do. I love what you guys do, benefiting the community. You can benefit the community very uniquely, where perhaps a traditional office therapeutic setting is not able to do. Magic that happens, if you will, is phenomenal. And I'm privileged to be a part of this industry. I'd be honored to help you with a quote and going from there.
I love that. Well, I will put your website and all of that good stuff in the show notes so people can reach you. They can just scroll down and click there, and that'll be super, super easy. So we appreciate you, Jonathan. Thank you for joining me on the show again and for sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for what you do. You are a great resource for everyone that isn't able to attend the different conferences and locations you go to. So I appreciate what you guys do very much.
Thank you, John. All right. We'll see you down the road at another conference, I'm sure, soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's all for today. But until the next episode launches, scroll down to the show notes and click on the link to get plugged in with us on Facebook, Instagram, or our exclusive educational club at Patreon. This podcast is presented by Hetra University, the educational arm of Heartland Equine Therapeutic Riding Academy in Gretna, Nebraska. Hetra University's mission is to provide high-quality educational offerings to the EAS community. Check out all the Hetra University has to offer at www.hetrauniversity.org.